Hello and welcome to BFCN Shorts, a series of short interviews where we talk to coaches who've worked all around the world. Our guest this episode is Nicky Baldock, who's here to talk to us about Cambodia. Enjoy. Nicky, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate your time. Now, currently you're in Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And now, how long have you been there?
I've now been here roughly just coming up to around 18 months.
Oh, very nice. It's pissing down with rain outside and it's freezing cold. So places.
I was in the UK for 2 weeks, about 2 weeks ago. I literally got off when my luggage hadn't come around the conveyor belt, and I was ready to get back on the flight to Saudi because it was freezing cold and I can't handle the cold.
It's grim and it's miserable. When I was in Kuwait, there was, I think, only in 3 months it rained once, and it took me 2 months to actually see a cloud. Came back to England, and it was like someone had turned off the lights. I couldn't see for a couple of days. It was all just dark and grey and grim. It took a while to adjust. We're not here to talk about the Middle East today. We're going to talk about your time in Cambodia. So let's lay the groundwork, because some people might not know where that is or even what Cambodia is. So tell us, where is Cambodia? Tell us a little bit about it.
So it's a part of Asia. It's sandwiched in between Thailand and Vietnam. So I imagine lots of people go to either of those countries and just pass by and don't even know it's there. And then Laos is to the north of it. So it borders those three countries. But beautiful. They call it the Kingdom of Wonder, and it is.
What is the weather and the climate like?
The weather, for the most part, is it's never cold. It's not. They have a rainy season, but so you can get caught in torrential rain. However, apart from the flooding, the torrential rain, you wouldn't necessarily get too cold. I don't recall wearing a jumper very often when I was living there. So shorts and t-shirt, flip flops for most of the year. You might get caught in a few rain showers, but that's part of the fun and part of the joy of living there.
So how long were you there for, and where were you based there?
So I was there for 2.5 years. I was based in the capital, Phnom Penh. So Phnom Penh isn't the most desirable part of the country, but it's got a huge sort of expat community. So that was, it was good to from a social element. It was amazing.
What's it like as a city then? Has it got decent public transport? Is it crowded?
No, it's very crowded. It's probably, I imagine it is the most populated part of the country. It's very different to the rest of the country because it is. I don't believe there might be some public transport. I don't recall ever using the public transport. Most people's means of transport is a tuk-tuk, a rickshaw type thing, or the family vehicle is a moped, which you'll quite often see a family of 5 riding on. The roads aren't the greatest. The traffic is definitely a problem. But it's part of the experience. It's once you get used to it, you know the shortcuts and the best ways to go.
So in your 2.5 years there, who did you work for? What role did you have?
So initially I was working in America at the time, and I applied for a job from the work board that you guys use. And so it was for a company called Elite Soccer Coaching. So I think they're roughly the biggest provider of soccer, kids, youth soccer within the country. So it's a guy called Christopher Grant. He's a guy from Edinburgh. He, I think, part created the Elite Soccer franchise. So I believe they've got there's an Elite Soccer in Edinburgh. I'm not sure if there's in other parts of Scotland. But yeah, they had definitely in Scotland there is an Elite Soccer. I don't know where else in the world there is, but he was part of the starting of that company. So his father lived in Phnom Penh, and obviously would go and visit quite, and then decided to make a life for himself there. He's an interesting guy. He was actually advisory to the Cambodian FA for a little while to try and help them develop football within the country, both in the professional, mainly in the professional sort of league. He then was taken on as a general manager for Swarian Football Club, which is one of the biggest football clubs within the country. So once he obviously was sort of full time with a general manager within Swarian, he needed somebody to kind of to run. He didn't want to fold the company that he had set up in terms of elite soccer coaching, because as anybody in football knows, you don't know how long the job's going to last. So as a backup, he always wanted to keep the company running. So initially, when the job I was employed for was a international manager of international schools. So as well as their own academy, private academy, they also, in order to kind of produce money, make money to pay the wages, we would go into international schools or some local schools as well and provide a football program. Sometimes it was a multi-sports program within international schools. So my job was to try and was to provide that service to the international schools, but also to try and create more contacts, get more jobs, bring in more money. So yeah, initially my role was international school manager. I was working alongside a Khmer coach, really good local coach. Khmer, by the way, is Cambodian. They call themselves Khmers. So I worked with a really, really talented local coach, but he eventually then got taken on as the assistant manager of Swarian. And then I became general manager of elite soccer. So I was in charge of our private academy and the international school side of the company.
It sounds like a lot of Asian cities where there's a lot of international private schools. Is that the majority of the work? And is that where you find a lot of the good facilities?
For sure, in terms of facilities, definitely in terms of the work, I'd say that's you're probably in a place like Cambodia where it's let's say the you're not earning a great deal of money. The average person in Cambodia isn't relatively well paid compared to the Western world. So the international school programs is almost, your bread and butter. That's what's going to keep you afloat. That's what keeps the company afloat in order for them to supply the private academy. And I guess wherever you find an international school in any country, I'm obviously now in Saudi Arabia, and it's very similar here. The kids that come to our academy are predominantly international school kids. So I imagine anywhere where there's international schools, and with that comes expats and expats kids. I imagine there's a business in most cities in the world for that.
Is football a popular sport? Are people watching it on TV? Do they go to the games of the top league?
So in Cambodia, it's definitely, I think volleyball is probably second. I'd say football is probably the biggest sport, then volleyball. They have a professional league, which is, again, Chris has been a huge help in developing that. And they've also got some aspiring young, there's a couple of Irish guys, Connor Nesta, Colum Curtis. These guys are very well, they've been working in the Cambodian league and have certainly helped develop training facilities, training methods. So they've got a few European coaches within that league now. There's a Ukrainian guy who I think actually spent some time at Shakhtar Donetsk and has now gone back to Cambodia. So they have a league, again, because the average person probably isn't in a great deal of money. I don't expect it produces a great deal of money from the spectator going into the ground. They can't afford to charge too much, otherwise you wouldn't get the attendance. People go to the professional league. Obviously, they watch the Premier League and the Champions League on TV, as most Asian countries do. There's definitely a love for it, and it's definitely a growing league and a growing football's growing without that through that country as we go on.
Outside of the private schools, is there a large grassroots scene?
So this is, for me, my personal opinion, the biggest problem they have. Again, the one thing they lack is the organization from the governing body, whether that's the Ministry of Health and Education. We're very privileged in the UK. We have the FA, and we probably take that for granted at times, but there's no sort of governing body that provide coach education, provide a league format or some relative organization. So there is none of that. There is the international schools do their thing amongst themselves. There are a lot of NGOs, charities that provide good programs and try their best. They really do try their best to provide some form of football in line with some education. But again, they're a charity and their hands are really tied. So there's no sort of support from the government, or there's no organization that actually runs. So there is no grassroots organized league. There's some coach education, but from what I hear and have experienced, it's very poor. So no, that's probably it's Cambodia for it to continue to develop, for it to take that next step to maybe compete with Vietnam and Thailand. For me personally, that's what they need to improve, is the grassroots football.
To go back to the start, you were in the United States working when you saw this opportunity. What was it then that appealed to you about going to Cambodia?
I'd been there. I spent some time traveling, sort of Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. So I traveled through. I only spent a week there, but at the time I like to travel. I like to, I've traveled quite a lot, personally, and I thought, I liked it when I was there. The people are, for me, I've traveled to 45 countries. For me, I'd probably say they are the friendliest, nicest people. Off the top of my head, they would be the ones I would say are the nicest people. It's an amazing country. The people are they couldn't be nicer. So at the time when I was there, I felt, I could maybe spend some time here. So the offer was there, and I thought, well, why not give it a go? Worst case scenario, I tried to go back to the US, or I come home if it doesn't work out.
Clearly you enjoyed it because you were there for 2.5 years. So what was it about Cambodia that you stayed there for so long?
The people, the social element for me was amazing. I'd probably say I had the best social life I've had within my life. Like I say, there's a really big expat community. I was fortunate. So I at the time I still tried to play now. So I signed up for a expat football team. They played in like a semi-professional. There was no second tier in Cambodia. So what would happen is a lot of the fringe players or released players would go and play in. It was a privately ran league, but technically was the second tier. They now have actually got a second tier, but at the time it was this kind of the second tier. So the expat team that I played for, we played within that. So there was a time when we played the semi-final it would be a league system with then a semi-final. And I was marking the guy who was top goal scorer in the Cambodian league because he didn't have a game that week. So he was playing for one of the teams in this competition. But I met that group of people. Real Phnom Penh was the name of the club. And that was the community. They then had a women's team, which I ended up coaching. I ended up coaching the men's team and the women's team. We then created a vets team as well. So, but it was a community. The three teams would socialize together. There was always something going on of a weekend, and it was that social element and that family element that I think kept me there for so long.
Speaking socially, then, what kind of things are you able to do for fun?
Lots of things. I mean, Cambodia at times can almost be a lawless country, so you can almost do anything. But there's in Phnom Penh itself, there's a huge there's bars, nightlife, lots of bars and lots of nightlife within Phnom Penh. But within the city, you're then right next to the countryside, so you could take a motorbike or cross and you're in the countryside, in the rural countryside. So you're seeing a little bit, that some people are living in a air-conditioned high-rise building, and across the river there's people living in hammocks in huts, and so you actually get to see the real Cambodia, and that's just a short trip across the river. So yeah, there's lots of adventure there. There's also the coast. Obviously, you can travel down to the coast, and you have the beach resort area. So yes, in terms of cycling, running, hiking, there's all lots of stuff like that to do, as well as obviously the everyday stuff that you would do in a city: cinemas, bars, stuff like that, restaurants.
Back to coaching. In what ways did it benefit you being there? How did you develop? I know you said you got to work with in schools, and you then had a men's team and a women's team. So it seems that you were able to not only get loads of coaching hours, but also a wide range of different teams and groups that you could work with.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing that I benefited from the most. Obviously, working with a very diverse age group. So I was working within elite soccer coaching. We were doing 4-year-olds, and then I was teaching men and women in their 50s. So it was a large age group, but also mixed ability, multinational. Within the women's team, we'd have some very young Khmer ladies, and then we would have some European or Western women that were sort of middle-aged women. So same within the men's team. So yeah, it's that diversity of working with different age groups, different ability levels. There obviously there was an element of language barrier, certainly with the Khmers. My Khmer was extremely poor, embarrassingly, and some of the people I'm working with didn't speak English. So that there's that. I guess the probably thing I got the best was to talk less. That the picture paints 1,000 words. So paint the picture as opposed to stand there talking, because nobody knows really what you're saying. So
I found that a lot of coaches who have worked in places where English is a challenge, and your coaching points become a lot more succinct. You can't waffle because they don't understand most of what you say. So it ends up being you run there. And actually, that might be all you need to say. So, because I think we overcomplicate things with too much context. Because if you see this, then you might want to do that. But consider when the defender's making that position. Now, just see this picture. I do that, and I think a lot of coaches who've been abroad in that situation come back better communicators, which is almost ironic, because you've had the ability to communicate largely inhibited. I suppose it's like a constraints-led approach to language. So,
for sure. I mean, even if not only do they maybe not understand what you say, but even if they have they speak good English, and they have a relatively good understanding of football, terminology in different countries is completely different as well. So, even working in America, you say certain things and they're looking at you as if you've got two heads, because the terminology is very different. So yeah, definitely, I think that's probably what I got the most, is to less talking and more demonstrations.
I do love a good tactic sport explanation as well. That's a lot easier to identify on a 2D plane like that. You read 7 there. So how has it benefited you as a person being in Cambodia, spending all that time working and living there?
Lots. I mean, I think it certainly makes you a little bit more humble. It makes you realize I was there during COVID, and like most people, I struggled with the lockdown was hard there, because a lot of the people live hand to mouth. So, for example, I was in my air-conditioned apartment with Netflix and Football Manager and TV, and the guy living next door to me, he's living in a hammock within his rickshaw. And there's me feeling sorry for myself, and I'm looking out the window and questioning to myself, why is it that you're so down, and yet this guy, his circumstances are far worse than yours. So I think there's an element of realism, to how privileged I am to be a white Western male. And yeah, so just giving me more of appreciation for what I do have. But yeah, lots of ways, really. Like I say, it's I met so many different people from different backgrounds, from different class levels, if you like. So yeah, I think it gave me that understanding to just judge people as to how I find them, not take any preconceptions of what people may or may not be like. Just judge them for how you find them, and make that effort to find out for yourself, as opposed to just believe what you read or people tell you.
No, that's a great point. Tell us, what are some of the best things about living and working there?
The people, for me, are the best things about living there. Like I say, the people, considering everything that's happened in the country's past, the people for me are absolutely amazing. Again, it's a beautiful country. It really is. There's so much rural parts of the country. Almost, you imagine people have been living the same way for quite some time. Aren't necessarily. Unfortunately, the mobile phone has slowly crept in there, so that's had a slight negative effect on parts of the country and some of the people. But in general, it's a very rural. It's some people who most commonly people would have been to Thailand or Vietnam, and I imagine Cambodia is probably 10 years behind those countries. So if you go there and you're in love with the rawness of the country, Cambodia is probably a little bit behind that. So you actually get to see the country as it was and has been for quite some time.
What were some of the challenges you faced in Cambodia?
There's a lot of challenges. I won't pretend. There was the language barrier is a massive one. Most people do speak English. However, I tried to learn that. It's a very hard language to learn. Very hard language to learn. So obviously the language barrier was at times frustrating. Again, because the people aren't they're not very well organized from top to bottom. It's like sometimes it's like the government don't help the people, and so again, you have to get used to that. When you're coming from a Western country, you're paying for a service and it gets done when you want it done or when you expect it to be done. That doesn't always happen. You have to accept that organization of things is a lot slower pace. It might not be done to the standard that you're expecting. So yeah, that's something you have to take into account. Poverty, I'll be honest, my journey from the airport to where I was going to be living, I couldn't believe it. Was a shock to the system. And I was from that journey alone, you're questioning, have I made the right move? Because you see people living on hand to mouth. What they earn that day is feeding the family that night. People living, like I say, in a hammock, and you're living in a nice air conditioned apartment next to them. So that takes some getting used to. Like I say, that for me is part of the thing I love about the people there. But it's definitely, as a Western man going into it, it was a shock to the system and something that definitely took some getting used to.
Let's talk about the living standards for a second then. So it sounds like there's a wide range in Cambodia where you do have a fair bit of wealth, but you've also got quite a lot of poverty as well. You were all right. You were able to be comfortable, air-conditioned apartment, as you said, and as long as you've got a football manager and Netflix, in most places you'll be all right. So someone going over there to coach, what could they expect in terms of living arrangements?
Yeah, I mean, you can get so to begin with, when I moved there, I was sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, pretty an old building, so had all the basic amenities, but it was quite an old-fashioned setup. But yeah, I was just to save money, basically. I was sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, but I had my own bedroom and I had my own bathroom, shared kitchen, shared living room. And then I moved in. I was dating a Cambodian woman, and we moved into a two-bedroom apartment. Probably the nicest apartment I've ever lived in my life, to be honest. Pool had a pool, had a gym. Very nice apartment. So again, depending on what you're willing to spend, you can either live very, very comfortably. You can live comfortably, or you can rough it with the locals if that's your preference.
I suppose you save a fair bit of money doing it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think again when we talked about things to do, that's something to do, is to, even if you go and spend a weekend kind of living like they do, I'm sure when you come away from it, you'll have a great appreciation for what you actually have and live in.
You mentioned that before you went to Cambodia, you initially were traveling to Asia and you passed through for a week. So when you took a job there, you kind of knew what you were getting into to an extent. But before you went there in the first place, or before you took a job there and actually lived there, what were some of the misconceptions that maybe you had or other people around you had? And I'm particularly thinking friends and families, they are often the biggest anchors to keeping people back home. Oh, I wouldn't go there. Oh, sounds a bit dodgy. What were some of the things that you experienced that people may have said or thought that weren't necessarily true or was completely wrong?
I think, if I'm brutally honest, in turn, with it being Cambodia, I'm not sure too many people even knew it was a country or where it was, or knew it existed, to be honest. So I think whenever you go anywhere, certainly your family are always worried. Certainly, probably even more so because it was the unknown. Um, but yeah, I guess similar to, again, what I would imagine is most people judge Cambodia or assume it's exactly like Thailand, which large parts of it are. I mean, it hasn't got the tourism that Thailand has. It hasn't got that. It does have a party scene, but not to the extent that that Thailand has. You know, if you went to Bangkok, it's nothing like Bangkok.
Yeah, I'll see
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's got an element of, you know, there's bars, there's nightlife, but not to the extent of the sort of Bangkok or Koh Samui. It's not quite that crazy. But so yeah, but it's relatively safe. I mean, obviously, wherever there's, in any country, whether there's poverty or no poverty, there's petty crime, there is crime. So yeah, like I said, I think the people and how kind the people are. I don't think I was ever expecting that, even having been there before. Until I lived amongst them, I didn't appreciate sort of how kind the people were, and what an amazing country they had. So yeah, I think even for me, even though I had some form of knowledge of the country, it still surprised me. But it surprised me in both ways. Seeing the poverty so close and living next door to it was a surprise. But also seeing how kind people are despite their circumstances, to me was probably the biggest surprise.
What advice would you give to someone who was considering working there?
Do it. Go for it. Even for me myself, the first six, and I'd say this about any country. When I went to America, when I came here to Saudi, probably the first 3 to 6 months is the hardest, because you're new to the country, you're getting to know the people, you're getting to know, so go there, give it time, make an effort to learn a language wherever you go, whether it's Cambodia or anywhere in the world. Do even if it's just to be polite, pleases, thank yous, you're welcome. So yeah, make the effort and try to be at the beginning as even if you're not necessarily a social person, initially try to make that effort to be social, because once you actually have a few friends or a support network around you, it definitely makes that transition easier. But yeah, like I say, within the first 6 months, I was considering whether I wanted to be there, and I was still there 2.5 years later. So yeah, just get over that initial homesickness or settling in period, and then I think you see the real place, the real people, and you'll appreciate it far more.
Yeah, that's excellent advice for anywhere, not just Cambodia. So thank you very, very much for coming on. Thank you for your time. I hope this has enlightened a lot of people. It certainly has. I've learned a lot about a place I knew very little about before coming on this. So I can't thank you enough for that. And yeah, all the best in Saudi Arabia. Sounds like you're having a lot of fun out there too.
No problem. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, to certainly to speak about Cambodia. And yeah, so far so good. Let's see what the future holds.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to seeing where you go. I'll keep an eye on on a lot of coaches who come on these and get to live vicariously through other people, and also take a lot of joy in seeing other people's successes. Just scrolling through LinkedIn, oh good, that coach has got, that coach is happy, excellent, that coach has won a league, that kind of thing. Love to see it. So yeah, keep up the good work, and I'll keep an eye on what you're doing, and chat again soon.
No problem. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for listening. You can now listen to these episodes on the BFCN app. We have some more great guests lined up, but we're always looking for more. If there's someone you've coached you'd like to tell us about, reach out and we'll have you on the show. See you next time.